Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. He was groomed to replace Babe Ruth. He was the people's Church. For those of you who speak the King's English, that's Kings County English, that's choice. He was the mayor of Flatbush. He was as popular a Brooklyn Dodger in the 1940s as Derek Jeter is today. He won the American League batting title in 1944. He led the league in RBIs in 1945. He was a .306 lifetime batting average and a three-time All-Star. He led a group of Dodgers in 1947 who opposed Jackie Robinson or any other black from joining the club. He's on the wrong side of a momentous tale of black and white. He's Dixie Walker, Brooklyn Dodger, and he's the subject of legendary New York sports writer Maury Allen's 40th book, Dixie Walker of the Dodgers, The People's Choice. Maury has written about sports for nearly a half a century, with the New York Post from 1961 to 1988 as the New York Yankees beat writer, and then with Gannett from 1988 to 2000. Maury is the Isaac Asimov of sports writing. 2 million words in print, 10,000 newspaper columns, and 40 published books. Welcome back, Maury.
Thank you very much, Doug. A pleasure to be with you.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you and to talk baseball. This particular book, why did you write a book about Dixie Walker?
All right, there are really two parts to this story. The first part is I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn, and I was a fanatic Brooklyn Dodger fan. Who was my hero? Dixie Walker. He was the greatest player in Brooklyn. He came to the team in 1939, was there through 1947. Those were the years that I really got into baseball as a kid.
How old are you? I don't want you to admit you're
I'm
rich.
78 now. So I was 7 years old when he came to Brooklyn in 39.
Right.
And I was really just starting to get emotional, as we all do in Brooklyn, did in Brooklyn, and he was our hero. Two reasons. He was a great player, and he had a great batting average against the hated Giants. He had 340 against the Giants lifetime, which is quite an exciting number, and he hit 21 home runs against the Giants in his career. So we all adopted him, and in 1944, with baseball at its lowest ebb because of World War II, he won the batting title. So he really kept the interest in baseball up in Brooklyn. So that was the big part of my emotional connection to him. Now we move forward 50 years or so, and I'm a sports writer, and I'm around, and I happen to meet a gentleman who says to me, at Yogi Berra's museum, actually, in Montclair, New Jersey.
Great place to go. Everybody
Absolutely.
should visit the Yogi Berra Museum in
Terrific.
Montclair.
Anyway,
great place.
I was doing a talk there, and he came up to me after the talk, and he said, I enjoyed your talk, but I just want to tell you, I have a baseball connection. I'm married to the daughter of a major league player. He said, but you probably don't remember him because it was many years ago. I said, who was he? He said, Dixie Walker.
So what?
When he said Dixie Walker, I almost fainted. I mean, the idea that Dixie Walker's daughter would be living in New Jersey. Anyway, we became friends. We started to talk about his career. She knew nothing about his career.
Nothing.
Nothing, other than he was a great father and a great family guy. She was only 3 years old when he stopped playing baseball. And the other part of the story was, of course, his relationship and his connection with this historic event of the first African-American to play Major League Baseball, Jackie Robinson.
Okay, so why do you write the book? What is it about Walker that leads you to spend a significant portion of your life writing this book?
What I'm really trying to do in this book, Doug, and I hope it comes through, I think it does, is we have to recognize what America was like in the 40s, what the general attitude of the population was, where race stood in the panorama of our existence. Dixie Walker was from Birmingham, Alabama. He was born in Georgia, raised in Birmingham, Alabama. His father, by the way, was a major league pitcher.
Famous baseball family, really.
Famous baseball family. His uncle was a major league player, and his brother, of course, was Harry the Hat Walker. Everybody knew him. And the more I researched the story, the more I realized that he had been labeled a racist in 1947 when it really wasn't an example of racism, but an example of cultural experience. And within a month of playing with Jackie Robinson in 1947, he recognized what a great athlete Jackie was, what a great contribution he was making to the Brooklyn Dodgers, and how his attitude, Dixie's attitude, changed towards African American people and players. And I think that has not really been advertised in America, how much white people have changed as a result of exposure to African Americans.
Okay, so let's going back to Walker, I went to my favorite Dodger fan, my mother, who's 87 years old and was a lunatic Dodger fan. In fact, as I've told you, the worst year of my life was between October 55 and October 56 when the Dodgers beat the Yankees in the World Series, and my father and brother and I were under constant assault from this lunatic Dodger fan. So I call her up in anticipation of the interview and I said, "What about Dixie Walker?" And she said, "Regular guy, wonderful, most popular Dodger. She used to sneak around Ebbets Field and knew where the players came out, and he used to give autographs.
Right.
She found him to be a real gentleman." And then her husband got in. He was a Yankee fan, but he started talking about the Dodgers. And almost simultaneously, about 10 minutes into the conversation, they almost simultaneously used the words racist and redneck.
See, that's
and
the
then,
classic.
Go.
That is the classic example. I mean, your mother is a perfect advertisement for why I did this book. We all make mistakes in our lives. I mean, we go through our lives, we say something that's embarrassing, we do something wrong, we make an error. We don't have to carry that burden all our lives. Dixie Walker carried that burden for the rest of his life. No matter how much he did for African American players, no matter how much he helped a lot of black players on the Dodgers, he was a batting coach, he was a scout. Whenever people thought of him, they thought of what he did in 1947, which is a little muddled. I try to explain it in the book.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that because there are different views on some of this stuff.
Different views of what he did. And he had this label, this advertisement, as a racist, and he truly was not a racist. He came from a city which may have been the most racist city in America,
Alabama,
Birmingham.
Right.
We know what happened in the 60s. It blew up churches and
Bull Connor,
Bull Connor and the dogs and all the rest of it. That was 1962, 3, 4, 5. What Dixie did was in 1947. So you could imagine the changes in attitudes as time went on.
Okay, and what was interesting in reading this book about Dixie Walker by you in particular is the fact that you were a rabid fan and a real admirer of Jackie Robinson. I mean, I remember an earlier book of yours, Jackie Robinson, A Life Remembered. I pulled out an article, Jackie Robinson, an American Hero. What was your view of Walker when you started writing this book?
It was interesting, Doug. I think when I was a kid watching the Dodgers and Jackie Robinson, all I cared about was, is this guy, Jackie Robinson, going to help us win? Are we going to be better off in our neighborhoods when we argue with the Giant fans? That was the bottom line. And of course he was. He was such an incredible, exciting player. And so the attitude of Dixie Walker was not as vivid in my mind as years later when I recognized that this identification was really a miscarriage of justice. And I got to know Dixie later on quite well when he was a batting coach and when he was a scout and when he was around the Dodgers. I never covered him as a player, but I knew him, and he was a perfect gentleman. He got along with everybody. I talked to a lot of the black players on the Dodgers. They all respected him. He respected them. So I just felt that this was a miscarriage of justice, and I wanted to clear the record. And I also wanted his baseball career, two things. One, his great career, 306 lifetime
We'll talk
average,
about that.
all the rest of it, and the creation of the pension for baseball players to be more important than the fact that he may or may not have been involved in a petition to keep black players off the Dodgers.
Okay, let's go back to 1947. And in some ways, 1947 is a major turning point, maybe the most pivotal season in the history of baseball. Red Barber, quote, the year all hell broke loose in baseball. So you've got Jackie Robinson. He's signed to a minor league contract by the Dodgers in 1945. He plays with the Montreal Royals. And in 1947, they purchase his contract and he plays in his first major league game. Talk about Walker and his response to Robinson from the 1945 Associated Press interview to the time that Robinson gets there.
The first thing that Dixie Walker said, Dixie Walker of Birmingham, Alabama, when Robinson was signed in 1945, he said, I don't care who they've signed as long as he doesn't play on my team. In other words, that was the attitude of all the Southern players, but he was the leader of the team. The only exception later on turned out to be Pee Wee Reese, who went out of his way to help Jackie.
Right.
But the attitude of all the Southern players. And in 47...
And not only the Southern players, Carl Furillo was from
Cookie
Pennsylvania.
Lavagetto
Right.
from California. The Dodgers had about 12 players from south of the Mason-Dixon line on the 47 team. What was also interesting about baseball in the 40s is that most of the players were from the South. It was something like 58% were from the South, because you could play baseball all year long, and the kids got to be better than a kid growing up in New York who played 10 games in the snow. And so that was a big factor. So Dixie didn't want to play for black. Now, later on, it turned out, and he said this in many interviews, and I talked to him about it later on, why didn't he want to play for a black? Because he felt uncomfortable or he was a racist? No. The answer was he ran a business in Birmingham, Alabama. He had a hardware store and a sporting goods store. And his feeling was, if I play with this black player on the Brooklyn Dodgers, in the winter when I need this business, nobody will come into my store because they'll say, hey, you played with a black.
So in a sense, economics trumps morality, if
Correct.
you will?
I think there's a big factor in that. Economics was the reason that so many alleged racist players suddenly sided with Jackie Robinson, because the bottom line was, hey, this guy's going to help us win. And if he's going to help us win, I'm going to get a $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 World Series share, which I would not get if he was not on my team. So that became much more important to the Brooklyn Dodgers. And by the middle of that season, 47, they all recognized what a great player this guy was, Jackie, and that they supported him, they helped him. And even Dixie Walker, I have a couple of incidents in the book where Dixie Walker wanted to improve the Dodgers, and he took Jackie out to the sliding pit in the outer part of Ebbets Field, worked with him there, taught him certain tricks of the trade. Dixie, of course, by then had been around, baseball for 15, 16 years. And they worked together. They were teammates. They
But
were
never close.
Civil. They were never close. Also, Doug, what's very important to recognize, two white players or two black players can be on the same team, and they may say hello to each other or good morning, and that's the end of it. We don't connect with every human being we ever meet in this life, especially in our
Well, I mean, this
business.
is a particularly difficult situation. Talk about the famous petition.
Okay, the petition is a big part of what happened to Dixie's image. In 1947, in March of 47, the Dodgers were training in Havana, Cuba.
That was another interesting digression. the whole part of the book that talks about spring training and Havana and Panama.
They were afraid. Ricky,
very interesting.
Ricky, who brought
Branch Rickey, the general manager of the
brought
Dodgers.
Jackie to Brooklyn. He was afraid if they trained in an unusual place, Daytona, Florida, there would be a lot of racism, a lot of antagonism against Jackie. So that he decided to go to Havana. Havana was sort of a international city in those days. This is way before Fidel Castro. And he felt it would be easier for Jackie and easier for the team. And that's what they did. They trained in Havana. On a particular weekend, while Jackie was still playing for the Montreal minor league club in 47, a bunch of the Dodgers, Hugh Casey, Ed Stanky, Kirby Higbee, Cookie Lavagetto, Bobby Bragan,
Carl Farrell.
Carl Farrell, about 6 or 7 of these players suddenly began circulating a petition in the clubhouse saying, I don't want to play on the same team with Jackie Robinson. Interestingly enough, Dixie Walker, whose attitude was clear against Jackie at the time, was not even physically in Havana. He had left the day before the petition surfaced to go to Florida to pick up his own family, his wife and his couple of small children, and bring them by boat to Havana where they could finish out the rest of spring training. The petition arrives. Some players sign it. Pee Wee, of course, didn't sign it. Ralph Branker, New York player, wouldn't sign it. 5, 6, 7, 8 players might have signed it. The petition physically does not exist.
So it didn't actually go to anybody?
No, it never got out of the Dodger clubhouse. So players say they saw it. A lot of them who are still around, like Bragan, who just passed away, but Ralph Branca, who's still around, Clyde King, who's still around, Gene Hermansky's still around, said, oh yeah, I remember a petition. I think they gave me a piece of paper to sign about Jackie, and I didn't sign it. And that was it.
But there was a petition because, in fact, I read Roger Kahn's book, I guess, called The Era, and Walker admits that he was at least one of
Supportive.
the folks supportive of this petition.
Yeah. The other thing that was interesting and that happened a couple of days after the petition, he sat down, Dixie Walker, and he wrote a letter to Branch Rickey asking to be traded. And the reason was he felt that the whole racial burden was falling on him, on Dixie Walker, and that his image was really damaged and distorted. And even though he'd been the great Brooklyn star, he felt he was going to be embarrassed by playing with Jackie and all the conflict that would result in this. So he wrote this letter, which does exist, and of course I have a copy of the letter in the book.
Okay, now, why did Rickey sign Robinson? What were the reasons? I mean, you've really looked at this and I've read your stuff. Why did he do it?
Doug, that is the greatest question about the whole integration of baseball. One, was it a moral question? Maybe. 2, was it an economic question? Maybe. 3, was it an ego question? Maybe. 4, was it to stick it to the other owners? There were only 16 owners then. He was saying, I'm going to do something that's going to get me attention, make me more famous, and you guys will all be against it.
And he tried to get buy-in from them, and they didn't buy in.
Absolutely. So the issue of why he signed Jackie Robinson is very complex. I try to analyze it in a book. I try to get into the depth of it. Here's a guy, Branch Rickey, who had an experience with a black when he was at Ohio Wesleyan. He went to school and he played Notre Dame, and Notre Dame wouldn't let a black player on his team get into the hotel. So he had some experience. But he had been the GM of the Cardinals for many years. You want a black player? Go sign a black player.
Right.
But he never did.
So the time was right, and
he
the
claimed
player was
later
right?
on, the time was right, the player was right, the pressure was building in the public. Remember also, we're talking about 1947, this is 2 years, a little less than 2 years, after the end of World War II. where blacks served in the military. Blacks were
In
killed
segregated units.
Yeah, but they were killed
Right.
in combat the way the whites were. And he was saying, we are a democratic, small d, society. They are entitled to their opportunities. Pee Wee Reese, who sided with Jackie's...
Who's a Kentuckian.
Kentuckian. His father was a racist. He says that. But he said the most interesting thing. He said, I fought in a war. I was in the Navy. I saw people get killed. How could I say to somebody, because of the color of his skin, you can't be the same kind of American as I am? In other words, work for a living, be a ball player, you know, build your home, build your family. So he just decided, now that was a moral question, Pee Wee. I think Pee Wee answered it in the, you know, finest moral position.
And in fact, there's the great photograph of Pee Wee Reese with his arm on Robinson's shoulder, because Robinson took a tremendous amount of abuse from fans and all. And Reese, that one photograph, I've seen it dozens of times.
Yeah, it's made into a statue in Keyspan Stadium.
Oh,
If
is
you go
it
to
really?
Brooklyn and Keyspan Stadium, you'll see the statue of Pee Wee's arm over Jackie's
'Cause that sent
shoulder.
the signal.
One other great little story
Go.
about that.
This is what you're here.
In early May, the Dodgers, Brooklyn Dodgers, were playing in Cincinnati, and there were a lot of racist letters. Cincinnati's close to Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah, it's
a lot of racism in the area.
It's the most northern of southern cities.
And so there were a lot of letters about, I'm going to kill you, to Jackie.
Yeah, death threats.
Death threats, violence, we're going to throw a bomb on a field. Gene Hermansky from New Jersey, who had played with blacks during World War II and when he was in the Coast Guard, he came up with a great idea. He said, let's all wear uniform number 42, which is Jackie's number, and therefore we'll go on a field, he said, and nobody will
That's funny.
be able to tell us apart.
That's funny.
Because
That's funny.
they wore
The
42.
same number. Not okay. I get it. Talking about 42, though, that is the only number in Major League Baseball that's retired. There's only one player who currently holds it because it's grandfathered, and fairly significant player, Mariano Rivera. On April 15th of this year, all the major leaguers wore number 42.
Right.
So it's really significant. Let's go back to Walker, though. What does the Dixie Walker story say to us today? I mean, what does it tell us?
What it really tells us, Doug, is I think what we're saying is people grow up with certain attitudes. You know, from South Pacific, the show, the movie, the book, you've got to be taught how to hate. Dixie Walker grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Every white kid is taught in Birmingham, was taught in those days, stay away from blacks. They're beneath you. They're a minority. You don't want to have anything to do with them. You got to be taught how to hate. And maybe he did hate black people before he met Jackie Robinson. Then he recognized what a decent human being he was, and he changed. And I think the one issue in American racial history that has never been emphasized, and I try to emphasize it in a book, is that we learn from our experiences. He learned that Jackie Robinson was no different than Pee Wee Reese, than Cookie Lavagetto, than any other player on that Brooklyn team.
And he's helping bring pennants and making an excitement. I buy to a certain extent this argument that people are part of their time and reflect their time. But there were also people of that time who rejected their time. There were the Reeses out there, and there were a lot of other people out there. And Rachel Robinson, in a piece that Harvey Arrington did on your book that appeared on April 9, 2010, I just want to pull out a quote from her. Maybe they learned better or changed, but at the time they had a chance to move forward from segregation and chose the opposite. So, yes, there are extenuating circumstances, but it's sort of in times of moral crisis.
Right.
I think Dante said in times of moral crisis, those who remain neutral or don't take a stand deserve the hottest place in hell. So, yeah, you can buy it to a certain extent, but you can't quite forget it, even though you might forgive it.
Right. I think there's a great truth to what you're saying, and I think you would wish in a beautiful, moral, perfect world that everybody judged people by their ability, as Martin Luther King said. But that's not the way it was.
Okay.
And it was not that way in '47. And I hate to be a critic of American morality in 2010, but there is still racism in America today. There are people who went to the polling booth, in November of 2008 and said, I'm going to vote for this guy, Barack Obama, because I support his opportunity, or I happen to be in a minority. And there were also people who went in that voting booth and said, I'll never cast a ballot for an African American. And I think that's part of American culture. It's gone on, from 1776 with slavery, and it's gone on to this day.
Okay, we've got, how much time do we've got? We've got 30 seconds. You make a case for Dixie Walker to be at least considered for the Hall of Fame. 306 lifetime batting average. Fair number of hits, fair number of runs batted in. Good ball player, but not Hall of Fame.
I think he's a Hall of Famer for two reasons. One, because he had the consistency of 18 years of a great career at 306. And the second thing is the pension. He changed baseball's existence with the creation of the Major League pension. In 1947, when an old ball player died, and if the family couldn't afford a funeral, they had to go around to the neighbors, give me $5, $10, $15, so I can bury somebody who used to be a Major League player. Dixie Walker cured all of that.
So this is another element in the Dixie Walker story.
Right, it's the total picture.
You've got 10 seconds. What's the next book?
The next book actually is, I'm going to go back to Brooklyn again, I think, and do another
love this.
Brooklyn Dodger book and get into the life of the Dodgers in that period of 40s that I've been involved in this book.
You love it. You see all your old buddies.
Right.
I mean, you cover it again. You got the life.
Right.
My thanks to Maury Allen, sports writer, author extraordinaire, and his newest book, Dixie Walker of the Dodgers, The People's Choice. A must-read for you baseball folks out there. Next week, my guest will be Jay Walder, head of the MTA. See you then. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.tv. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.